On today's podcast, we sit down with Rio Caraeff, a true visionary at the intersection of music, technology, and data. Over the past 3 decades, Rio has helped shape some of the industry's most transformative platforms, including Vivo, Universal, Sony, and Sing. Now, as president of Musixmatch, the world's leading music data company, he's building the next frontier in how fans discover and connect with songs across over 250 languages. We explore the atomic kernel of the music business, songwriting, lyrics, and the power of data to drive new revenue streams, fan engagement, and innovative AI tools. We discuss the hardest challenges Musixmatch has faced in transforming raw data into actionable insights, how meaning travels across cultures and languages, and Rio's guidance for aspiring artists and industry professionals. From the future of global music discovery to the role of analytical AI in empowering creators, this conversation will change how you see music's role in the digital age. Insiders, are you ready?
Welcome to MUBUTV's Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Welcome back, Insiders, to another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage your music career. On today's episode, we welcome visionary, tech entrepreneur, and music executive Rio Caraeff. From shaping the digital future of Vivo to pushing boundaries at Universal and Sony, Rio has been at the center of music's most transformative platforms. Now, as president at Musixmatch, he's reimagining how lyrics, AI, and data are changing the way fans discover music, how songwriters get paid, and how the industry connects across cultures and languages. Today, we dive deep into Rio's journey on why he believes lyrics are the atomic kernel of truth in music, how Musixmatch is powering next-generation discovery and royalties, and what the future holds for songwriters and creators as AI reshapes the business. We'll explore the challenges of turning raw data into empowering tools for artists, innovative translation technology that breaks down global barriers, and get Rio's advice for young artists, plus a personal look at his unique inspiration growing up among rock legends. Insiders, if you've ever wondered how lyrics, technology, and creative vision come together to shape the music industry, you won't want to miss this episode. But first, a word from our sponsor. Hey, Insiders, ready to crush it in the music world? Whether you're an artist, band, or future music biz pro, MUBUTV's personalized coaching is your secret weapon.
We'll work with you side by side, sharpening your songs, building your brand story, locking in your ideal audience, and powering up your social media game.
Starting fresh or ready for the next level, we cover everything: live shows, marketing hacks, branding, all tailored just for you.
Flexible coaching packages let you decide what fits your time and budget. Single sessions or discounted bundles that make investing easy.
Imagine the boost after just one session: clearer goals, smarter strategies, and unstoppable confidence. Get started with a free 15-minute discovery call at book.mubutv.com. That's book.mubutv.com. Let's make your music career unstoppable. Hey, Insiders, are you ready to take serious control of your music career? Whether you're dreaming of getting signed, finding the perfect artist manager, or landing your music in movies and TV shows, MUBUTV has you covered with 3 essential free guides.
First, learn how to contact A&R the right way. The insider secrets to approaching executives without burning bridges and with confidence.
Next, discover how to attract the right artist manager, when to start looking, what to expect, and how to find someone who truly believes in your vision.
And finally, unlock the world of sync licensing with how to pitch to music supervisors the right way. Get your music placed in film and TV, reach new audiences, and open up exciting revenue streams.
These guides are packed with real-world advice, practical steps, and the do's and don'ts every artist needs.
If you're listening on this podcast or watching on YouTube, just check the description below to download your free copies now. This is your blueprint for turning dreams into reality. Don't miss out.
Rich, it's that time of year again. Muse Expo 2026 is just around the corner.
Yeah, and it's the 26th year.
I can't believe that.
I know. It's absolutely, I mean,
you've been to all of them almost. I think you've been to all of them.
Every single one from the time he started it in the year 2000.
Unbelievable.
At the Bellage Hotel. That's what it was called back then on Sunset and San Vicente. Yeah, he began it 26 years ago. This is the 26th year for Musixmo. It's one of the great, it's called the United Nations of music conferences. And it's really an incredible event that's going to be taking place, I believe, on March 22nd.
Through the 25th.
Through the 25th.
And it's going to be at the Castaways in Burbank, which is a beautiful location for anybody that hasn't been there or seen it. It's a beautiful kind of overlook of all of the downtown Burbank.
Absolutely. And there's going to be some incredible people there. The entire music team of Netflix, all of their top music executives are going to be there.
Also Marvel.
Exactly. The music supervision team behind all of the Marvel movies is going to be there en masse, all of them together, talking about the work on the Marvel films. I mean, this is a really great opportunity. There's going to be A&R executives. We're going to be having people like Chase Butters, who's the head and vice president of Sync for Concord. We've got people like Dave Jordan, who we had mentioned earlier, is the founder and CEO of Format, who does all of the Marvel films.
And we're going to be there, so that'll be a great opportunity for anybody who comes down for the event. You'll get to meet us because we'll be there taping at the shows for the podcast and for the video series. So that'll be a great opportunity. You guys out there, visit musexpo.net and register now for the event. Again, it's March 22nd through the 25th in Burbank, California. And like Rich said, it's a great opportunity and a really great event to meet people from the worldwide music industry. So visit musexpo.net.
Hi, this is Ruchir Mohan, partner at 1916 Enterprises, and you're listening to the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.
Welcome back, Insiders. Today's featured guest is visionary tech entrepreneur and music executive Rio Caraeff. This was a fascinating conversation, Eric, for many, many reasons.
Definitely.
Number one, he's talking about expanding the whole nature of listening on a global level in terms of translations and so forth. But number two, more importantly, and we've talked about this many times on the show, I believe that the greatest growth in the music industry is going to come from outside the United States. Yeah. It's going to come on an international level.
Right.
And he spoke about that, I think, many, many times. He talked about translations as a bridge across cultures, lyric translation, and how that's now being embraced by Apple and Spotify and helping fans learn languages and connect more deeply with global artists. So it's not just going to be Anglo artists. We're seeing the explosion of Latin music.
Right.
We're seeing the explosion of, different territories of the world, Arabic, African.
You're seeing it happening on YouTube as well, too. YouTube, actually, this podcast right now that you're listening to that we post up on YouTube, we have now, I guess, the ability, or people that are around the world in their native languages are getting this in their own language being said to them now. So you could be hearing this in Spanish now. It's not us saying it in Spanish, but it's, I guess, a translator that's saying it over there. So it's my whole point of what you're saying now, that all of this is now becoming more globalized.
Exactly. So the world is becoming a smaller place.
Right.
And I thought just the whole concept of, what he's talking about in terms of the utilization of songs, we've never heard that particular usage before, which I thought was a really interesting point.
Yeah, and one of the other areas, speaking of lyrics, continuing with that theme, because that's what they do, lyrics as a new income stream. Lyrics now represent up to 1% of publishing income, a revenue source that barely existed a decade ago. So this is now another source of revenue that's going to start playing into your whole pie as being an artist.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the possibilities as we'll get into with the conversation with him on metadata and what that means for songwriters and the value that it's going to create is immense.
And with that, Insiders, sit back, relax, and enjoy our featured conversation with Rio Caraeff. Go ahead.
Rio, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. You have spent your entire career at the center of some of the most transformative platforms in music. Vivo shaped how fans consume video, Universal and Sony pushed the industry's digital strategy, and Sing explored the future of spatial audio. In 2023, you chose to join Musixmatch, which is the world's leading music data company. I think what began as a platform to make lyrics accessible has evolved into a global infrastructure powering music discovery, royalties, translations, and even now how fans emotionally connect with songs across over 250 languages. What was it about this company and the role of lyrics and data that convinced you this was the next frontier worth building on?
Yeah, it's really a great question. I can answer it in a few different ways. I'd say the first and most important reason for me was, after being in the music business and at the intersection of music and tech for nearly 30 years, essentially, I wanted to get closer to what I would call like the atomic, kernel of truth, right? Once you strip away the business of music, and you strip away the recording of music, what is really left? What is the atom with which we orbit around? And it's really the song, right? It's the lyrics, it's the underlying composition. And if I'm honest, I never really worked in music publishing, right? I was always on the recorded music side. And, I felt like I had a good grasp on that, but I was really never intimate, with songwriting and music publishing and kind of stripping away the recording and getting to the heart of, without the song, there is no music. So I realized, that I didn't have, essentially any experience, on the music publishing side, even though when I was at Universal, I ran the digital business for the recorded side and the publishing side. I was really more focused on the recorded side. So the first answer is I wanted to get some real publishing experience, and lyrics are, of course, at the heart of that. And so that was important to me. Second reason is I wanted to get back to what I would call being a builder, right? Not just focusing on licensing, not just focusing on strategy or deal making, but really feeling like I want to build products, I want to build services, I want to obsess over customers and make them happy. I want to solve problems for businesses and create opportunities. And so, I didn't want to be at a giant tech platform. I didn't want to be employee number, 300,000. I wanted to get to a smaller company. So at Musixmatch, we've got about 120, 125 people. So it's a good size, not too big, not too small. And then, so for me, it was I think the last bit, which was also important to me, is being able to work with a founder. So Max Chiacciola is the founder of Musixmatch. And, and the founder is always the person who can see through the needle to a world that doesn't exist yet, and nobody else can see it. So 15 years ago, there was no business of lyrics, and there was a Wild West online, and nothing was licensed, and there was no income and no opportunity, and it was easily dismissed, and the publishers didn't have the lyrics. And basically, it takes a particular fortitude, to say, I believe this can change. I believe this is unjust. I believe, that something can be built here. And so I really have a reverence for founders, and being able to work with a founder is really exciting for me, because they, are really the heart and soul, of a business, and they're not there, forever. So it's important, to bear hug it, while you can. There. So those are some of the big reasons. I wanted to get back to building. I wanted some music publishing experience. I love working with founders. The company had just been sold to TPG on the private equity side. And so I also wanted to get some experience, on that side as well.
Rio, it's really great to have you on the show. I wanted to ask you, Musixmatch sits at the intersection of lyrics and metadata and the broader music ecosystem. Given your background building global platforms like Vivo and driving digital strategy at Universal, how did you envision Musixmatch evolving beyond lyrics? And what gaps in the ecosystem do you believe Musixmatch is uniquely positioned to fill over the next 5 years?
Yeah. Lyrics it's like that iceberg analogy. It looks simple, it looks visible, right, from the surface, but there's a big part under the water that's not visible and is not well understood. I think that what I saw right away in terms of opportunity was that lyrics are what I would call a surface area for engagement, a surface area for your time and attention. It's when you have synchronized, aligned word by word lyrics inside of Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or even in Instagram stories, you're not just listening to the music, you're watching the music, you're seeing the music, you're part of the music. And so it turns music from something in the background to something that's active and not just passive. And so that's valuable to DSPs. It creates an opportunity to keep your attention. We're in an attention economy. It's an opportunity to turn you on to other songs, other videos, other experiences, to drive you deeper into the music and the artist. So lyrics, I think, are valuable from that perspective. the other things that I think are key, we built a business called Musixmatch Pro, which is essentially a set of tools and services to allow songwriters and artists and labels and distributors to basically have what I would call agency and influence and control over their destiny. So they can essentially say, hey, I want to distribute all my lyrics to every DSP and every service provider. They can say, I want to translate them into 200 languages. I want to synchronize them with the sound recording. I want to create lyric videos and put them out on YouTube. I want to be able to, get insight into my royalties and into my finances and my projections. I want to be able to, interrogate my catalog and the global history of music with AI. So it's essentially a boundless set of tools that are grounded and based on lyrics. And that's a new business that didn't even exist 2 years ago. And that's already, we have millions of artists using that service today. And we're now moving to integrate it it's fully integrated into DistroKid and other distributors. And we now have major labels and major publishers using it to find songs for sync licensing or, be able to do different purposes with it. We have other services using it for lyric fingerprinting. And, so there's a whole range of utility that you can build businesses from on top of lyrics, on top of once you know who the songwriters are, once you know what the splits are, and how do you account to everybody and pay everybody and match all the streaming activity with all of the underlying rights administration, which is what we do. So I saw essentially a huge opportunity to create a nearly infinite stream of businesses for almost if you forensically dissect the supply chain of music, there's an opportunity there for everybody. And also you can just say, hey, that's a lot of work. Hey, Musixmatch, do it for me. Right? You can just outsource it. Instead of saying, here's tools to empower you, you can also say, no problem, we'll do it all for you. So I always believe ultimately, businesses only want to buy solution to a problem or access to an opportunity, and everything else is secondary. It's really, that's what we do. So the lyrics business for Spotify and Apple and Amazon is important, but how do we provide services to the rest of the industry is really what I'm excited about.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to just go a little deeper with you on, because it was so interesting hearing you be so articulate in laying out the very specifics. Musixmatch, you have access to one of the world's most comprehensive sets of lyrics and music data. And I don't need to tell you, data is powerful, but its value depends on how it's structured, licensed, and applied. And this is the part that, you lived through during your period of all of those previous jobs that you had in the music business. The rights and the permissions and doing new things is not always an easy thing to get access to or to have people see the vision. What have been the hardest challenges that Musixmatch faces in transforming raw data into actionable insights or new business opportunities like what you were speaking about, for artists and for labels and for platforms alike?
Yeah. Just last week on Wednesday, we announced essentially, I'd say probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my career. We announced essentially an industry-wide set of deals with all of the major music publishers to essentially build new products built on top of AI, on top of their catalogs. So we announced deals with Universal Music Group, with Warner Chappell, with Sony Music Publishing. Essentially, I call it like a license to hunt, right? Essentially, or the blessing, of the top rights owners in music publishing, to be able to, essentially it's a validation of trust, right? That it's trust that you're going to do the right thing. It's trust that you're not going to, be a bad actor or be on the wrong side of history. It's a sense that the industry is finally recognizing that there's opportunity here. It's no longer about, litigation only or about waiting for courts, to decide outcomes. It's about saying we've got to bear hug this and get in here and make it happen. And so, I often call us like the barbarian in the gate, not the barbarian at the gate, right? We're not trying to burn down the village. We're trusted for 15 years to live in the village. We have 15 years of no legal claims, from any rights owner ever. We run $300 million, through the business, every 18 months or so of royalties that we pay out to rights owners. So we're trusted essentially by major publishers, by the long tail, by everybody in between to essentially do what we say we're going to do and to properly pay songwriters, artists, and rights owners. So that essentially allows us to build essentially all of these new services, some of which I touched on. And that's some of the hardest things I've done because those are not easy deals to do.
No, they're not.
It's never been done before in music publishing. So I'm proud, and I've been working on those for about a year. So I was really happy to see us be able to get that out last week. And now the exciting part starts where you've actually got to translate that energy and that excitement into something real.
That's really great. Rio, as streaming matures, discovery and engagement are increasingly tied to context, personalization, and cultural meaning. I'm curious, how is Musixmatch leveraging its global data set spanning languages, genres, and markets to unlock new forms of discovery or fan connection that platforms like Spotify or Apple Music can't replicate on their own?
Yeah, it's the company was founded in Italy, and I'm from America, and so when you're coming from the Western world, from the U.S., you have a bit of that bias and that perspective. And so one of the interesting things I learned right away was that music and the power of a song and lyrics are how basically most of the world learns English, right, and learns other languages. I even remember the Prime Minister of Italy talking about, thanking her English teacher, Michael Jackson, right, for teaching her English. And so I think translations is something I'm proud of because we've been working on that for a long time. Apple just started shipping it in September, announcing it in June. Spotify is just starting to roll that out as well. So translations are key. Another thing we're doing with DSPs, we're introducing what we call performer tags. So if you have a song where you have multiple singers, you have Bruno Mars, doing a song with Lady Gaga, you can see now in the lyrics, this is Lady Gaga singing. Okay, now it's Bruno Mars singing this part. So you have all of that in there. We're doing things that essentially allow services to build new AI, products on top of lyrics. But I'd say the most important thing we do, which is easy to glaze over and is often not well understood, is taking all of the streaming activity from every service, taking all of the activity on YouTube, on Google, on Meta, on Snap, and essentially matching it with every song and paying everybody, right? So we're often called like a CMO for lyrics, essentially, where we take many billions of streams each month and correlate it. That's where the match in Musixmatch, comes from. Match it with all of the songwriter and splits database that we have, which other people, don't have, and essentially pay everybody. And I was very proud at the NMPA annual meeting in June, where David Israelite had a slide talking about where does all the money come from for songwriters, right? Where's all the income streams, that they could enjoy or could participate in? And for the very first time this year, lyrics was on the board, right? I was proud to see it at 1%, of the music publishing industry, but it feels, even though it's the smallest part of the music publishing world, it's nice to finally make it on the board with all the other income streams.
No,
so
absolutely.
Those are the type of things we do.
Hey, insiders, we hope that you've been enjoying our featured conversation. Stay tuned because we've got so much value coming your way. But before we dive back in, a word from our sponsor. Hey there, insiders. Are you dreaming of making it big as a musician, artist, or industry pro? Well, at MUBUTV, we offer personalized coaching to help you turn that dream into reality.
Think of us as your personal guides, helping you polish your songs, craft your story, find your fans, and grow your social media like a pro.
No matter where you are in your journey, we've got the tools and strategies to take you higher. From live gigs to branding and marketing, our coaching is all about you.
Choose what fits your budget, from single sessions to value-packed bundles.
Start with a free 15-minute discovery call today at book.mubutv.com. Your music career is waiting. Remember why you started making music? That feeling of passion, hope, and longing, wanting someone to hear your story?
But chasing success can be confusing. Who do you reach out to? When? How do you avoid mistakes that could close doors?
At MUBUTV, we believe every artist deserves a clear path forward. That's why we've created 3 free guides that cover the essential skills every musician needs.
How to contact A&R executives with confidence. How to attract an artist manager who gets you. How to pitch your music for film and television placements.
These aren't just tips. They're blueprints designed for artists who want more than just dreams. They want results.
If you're listening right now on this podcast or watching on YouTube, look in the description below. Download these free guides that will change how you approach your music career forever.
Don't wait. Your future fans are waiting.
What's going on, y'all? This is Young Land, Grammy-nominated multi-platinum producer, songwriter. Are you an insider? I am. Subscribe now.
Absolutely. No, that's no small feat to be able to make that kind of contribution, especially with something new that wasn't bringing in an income, 10, 12 years ago, without exception. Right. On that note, Rio, I wanted to ask you, you guys have pioneered the line by line, word by word, and I think even letter by letter lyric synchronization.
Yeah.
Beyond karaoke style experiences, what new forms of music engagement or monetization do you think this kind of precision can unlock?
I think, one of the things I'm excited about and, is essentially is karaoke-like services, right? And I think humans, want to self-express and want to sing, but they're self-conscious. And I was in a Waymo, self-driving car here in Austin, and I've got music playing in the back of the car. I've got no driver, to feel like they're judging me, right? And I could just, I was sitting there going, if I had our word by word synchronized lyrics, here on the back of the screen, then I would be a perfect place, to do that. And so, and even karaoke as a market, has the small market. It's mostly never broken out of Asia. It's been harmed economically by TikTok and others. But I always felt like these businesses are, they're $10 businesses stuck in a $5 bag, right? If that makes sense, right? Like even the music business itself, is underperforms the cultural weight, right, that it has. It should be a much bigger business than it is, economically speaking, considering how it moves culture and moves sports and moves fashion and moves politics and all of these things. So I always try to separate what is the business of music, and then what is the hard-coded into our cellular DNA that's been there for many thousands of years, right? So you're not going to wake up one day and find a continent of 1 billion people, who just all of a sudden don't like music, right? So I try to remember that we all love music in any language and any continent, and it's all rooted in nonverbal communication and dance, and it's up there with sports and religion and storytelling as things that make us human. And so that invigorates me and makes me realize, however hard the business of music is today, that that's a healthy foundation to build it on, because it's just a part of who we are. It's why my 2-year-old daughter will just dance to Bob Marley, and it's just built into who we are, and that just makes us human. So that gets me excited about all the opportunities in music for the future and for the next ascendant generation that's coming up.
Indeed. Rio, your CEO Massimo in a recent interview has described Musixmatch's new direction as one that's centered on analytical rather than generative AI. It's a subtle but profound difference. What kinds of insights or opportunities does analytical AI create for publishers and creators that generative systems by their nature cannot?
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. First of all, it doesn't mean that we won't do generative. Right? It just means that that's a harder and more complicated thing to do, right? Because you get into training and inference and who owns the copyright, and how do you pay everybody whose art contributed to that. So, but we're very excited about generative, but we're starting, in the area that you just described. So I'll give you some quick examples. So let's say you run the sync licensing department at Warner Chappell, music publishing, and you've got 3 million songs, in your catalog. You can't keep all 3 million songs in your head, right, at any time, or your team. But you can take the RFP, from Nike for their new shoes and run it into a product called Music Lens, right, that we've built, which is essentially an AI product that can be trained and running just on the Warner Chappell, catalog. And then it can essentially pop out, here are 5 songs, from the Warner Chappell catalog that are a great fit for this Nike RFP, and here's exactly why, right? And then you might not have had those 5 songs in your head,
Right.
because you can't have all 3 million,
Right.
at the same time. Another example would be, there's editorial examples. This is less maybe business and more interesting though. Like, let's say, so The Economist, wants to do a story on how music essentially is shaping politics or the economy or our culture. And you could then say, okay, well, tell me about how why songs about love are in a multi-decade decline, right? Why for the last 50 years have fewer and fewer songs been about love, right? And so you can analyze, you can apply the power of large language models, to lyrics and all of the history of music and gain insights into the economy and fashion and food and culture and, what are the top 3 luxury brands that are sung about in songs in the US in the last 3 months, right? So you can do things like that. You could even then, look at your catalog of, if you're the CFO of Universal Music Group, and you can basically say, let me figure out where my next hit songs are going to come from, right? If these songs comprise most of my earnings over the last quarter or over the last 4 quarters, let's do a projection on which songs are likely to make the most income in the next 3 quarters, or which songs of which genre or which artist or which language or which that have these words in them. So you can basically do forecasting, financial analysis, sync licensing, creative opportunities, help me write the song, help me finish the song. You could even then say, help me find songs that are on the internet that are copies of my songs so I can take them down or claim them. So there's all these opportunities that are out there in songwriting and in lyrics that you can build these new products on with AI.
Yeah, it's fascinating hearing you speak about that, because those kinds of opportunities, when it comes to catalogs, especially gigantic catalogs, I mean, it's fascinating to think that it wasn't that many years ago that you just, those departments, the sync department, they just had to know what was in the Warner Music catalog, or know, and that's an impossible task. I mean, to really know, and here AI probably can assist you in what would be the best ones to redo modern versions of our songs for sync or for newer kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
So I wanted to ask you, in that same interview with Massimo, he also said that without songwriters, there can be no music industry. And I guess my question is, as AI continues to evolve and reshape nearly every corner of, creativity, what does protecting and empowering the human songwriter really look like to you in the years ahead?
Yeah, I like to think about amplifying human potential, or essentially giving us superpowers, right? So what could I do that I couldn't have done before? What could I do armed, with this new capability, with this new super intelligence and superpower that I have, these new tools that allow me to express myself and create in new ways. So I look at it as essentially it's essentially what's happened with human creativity with every technological breakthrough for the last 1,000 years. Essentially, is that some people look at it as a threat, some people look at it as an opportunity. A tool is inherently neutral. It can be used for good or for bad. But I tend to look at it as, what could I do that I could never have done before? And then I like to think about, it doesn't really matter what I think, right? I'm 50 years old. I'm basically dead, right? It's essentially, it's like, what is my 3-year-old going to do? What is my 10-year-old going to do? And when they don't know a world, without this, right? And they're not living in fear and thinking about what they're missing. They're just focused on, what could I do, with these new powerful new set of tools. And so I look at it as a giant magnifying glass that amplifies human creativity and human potential. And that's how I choose to look at it. But it's an optimist view, of course, but I believe that you have to be an optimist to be an entrepreneur and to be a builder. You can always choose to be doom and gloom, and this is how all the things that are going to go wrong. But those people never build anything or do anything. And so to me, it's much more interesting and satisfying and rewarding to focus on what can I build with these new tools, instead of saying, here's all the things that are going to go wrong.
Rio, it's often been said that music is universal, but when you look at lyrics through the lens of translation, you start to see all these fascinating subtleties in how people feel and express things. From your vantage point at Musixmatch, what have you learned about how meaning travels or transforms when a song crosses languages and cultures?
Yeah, being able to get context and meaning, of a song. So seeing it in if you're speaking Portuguese, if you're speaking, German, and you're listening to Spotify, and you could see and experience the music in English, and then also in German, and then also with pictures and video, and also synchronized and aligned with the sound recording. You basically now have the means of understanding. This is what it says, but more importantly, this is what it means. And then that's essentially a very powerful thing on a very base level, because it allows you to relate to and understand other human beings, right? And communication and lack of communication is really the root of all problems, usually. And so anything that allows you to understand, each other, and for us to relate to each other across borders, across cultures, across languages, across, the political divide, I think is a good thing. So music breaks down these artificial tribal, barriers, and allows us to relate to and understand and comprehend each other. And so I take pleasure in simple things like that.
Yeah, and you had addressed this earlier, Rio, when you spoke about never before in our history has the ability to put music, and especially lyrics, into the language of the person, reading it or understanding it or experiencing it. Never before have we been able to do that on such a massive scale. It was almost like, when you had hits, you had the English language hit that, went throughout the world. And it rarely, at sometimes over historically, but rarely did it go the other way, where a big French record or a big Swedish record or a Chinese record would be the converse. So it's almost like, as I listen to you, I think like the possibilities of expanding the boundaries of music really become much, much more extensive than ever before in terms of their reach and impact.
Yeah, that's right. I go back, I got into music business in 93 approximately. And, so I was, sold the first song, over the internet from a major label. And I was a co-inventor of the subscription licensing model we have today and the music video licensing model. And, but at the end of the day, humans are paralyzed by decision. Right, too much choice means I don't make a choice at all.
Yeah,
and so that was always my fear. With when music goes from being a product to a service, and all of a sudden I have access to all the music. That doesn't mean I'm gonna find anything I like. Right. So I think also lyrics and all the, not just lyrics, but all of the data points, right, that you can infer, from lyrics, from tone and meaning and emotion and sentiment. All of that, can help you discover new music and recommend new music and try this new music. So it's not just about people who like this artist will like that artist. It's about, here's a powerful song, from a songwriter that you may not have ever heard of, but we think it'll resonate with you based upon all the other songs, that you're listening to. So it's a deep well of, in techno speak, data sets, right? We're in a data set age, and on all of the new data points that you can infer from lyrics and from the underlying composition through AI, I think will improve discovery and recommendation and radio and all of these things. Yeah, so that's a part of it. So you can kind of tell I'm excited about it, and that's important to me because, after being in music for so long, I want to stay curious, I want to stay interested, I want to stay engaged. And focusing on lyrics and the underlying composition and music publishing has really given me the opportunity to do that. So I can feel like I'm comfortable and I know, how this all works, but I can also feel like I'm a beginner, and don't know, anything.
Right.
Because I've been in music for so long, but I've been in music publishing for so little, amount of time that it still feels all brand new to me, even though I'm I feel oriented and not disconnected.
Which is a very exciting thing. I want to ask you, looking back over your own journey, have there been any books, films, or documentaries that you have found to be particularly inspiring that you could recommend to anyone who wants to follow a similar path in the music business?
Yeah, I can answer that maybe in a slightly unorthodox way. I don't know if you're aware, my father was a famous rock and roll photographer. And so from 1967 to 1983, he photographed, art directed, and designed, over probably 900 album covers.
Wow.
He won Grammy Awards. The most famous photo was Jimi Hendrix lighting his guitar on fire.
Oh, yes.
At Monterey.
Monterey.
In 67. He was 17 years old, when he shot that photo, which was on the cover of Rolling Stone twice and Time Magazine. But, he did every Steely Dan album, every Elton John album, every Bee Gees album, every Hall & Oates album, every Neil Diamond album, every big record in the 70s and early 80s. And so I grew up essentially surrounded by what I like to call, visual music. Essentially the power of music married with the gatefold LP and all of the photos and all of the lyrics, right? And all of the credits and all of the notes, that were in that analog rich experience. You put the record on, you'd sit down, open up the gatefold LP and get into the music experience, not just listening, but actively participating in the music. And that got lost, essentially as we got into CDs and as we got into iPods and as we got into MP3s and as we get into streams, right? The access, trumps and convenience, trump ownership and quality, but all of the richness of the underlying data and underlying storytelling, somehow got lost. And the pendulum so swings hard in different directions. And I think it's coming back now and allowing us, all of the lyrics, all of the interesting stories you can tell. I think we're now moving not just about the stream, but we're moving into, everything else you can do around the stream and on top of the stream. So to get back to your question, so for me, the inspiration of my journey, I think, why I got into music, why I started Vivo, why I work in music today is because of, ultimately we're a product of our environment and who we come from and what we're exposed to. And so the format, and that was really, I'm not a musician and I wouldn't not even call myself a creative, person, but I grew up around artists. I grew up around, my father who's an artist. And my first haircut was, Olivia Newton-John, given to me. My Dolly Parton helped me learn to read, when I was 3. And so I grew up with artists in our home and surrounded by artistry and creativity. And I think that really shaped, who I am. So it's not one documentary or one film, but really the compendium of my, but the first 10 years of my life, I think that made me who I am today.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a unique one. We've never had somebody kind of articulate it that way. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Rio, your career has always been about pushing boundaries and reimagining how artists connect to audiences and how music intersects with culture. Thinking back on your own journey, what guidance or inspiration would you offer to young artists and industry professionals that are trying to build their own path in music today?
Yeah, I would say, the most important thing is to be really curious and deeply thoughtful about what it is you're trying to do. So I meet a lot of people and they say, I love music, right? So I want to get into the music industry, right? But that's, to me, I always push real hard back at that because that's like saying, I like playing video games, so I want to make video games. Or I like going to the movies, so I'm going to make movies, right? That sounds good, but you really have to go a lot deeper. And so I think I was fortunate that when I was in my early 20s, I was able to really figure that stuff out. So I was able to figure out, okay, well, people who make music, what is the enemy of artistry is obscurity, right? So what can I do to help artists connect with people who are looking for their art? How does an artist make a living, right? They need to pay rent, they have to pay tuition or mortgages or put food on their table or take care of their parents. And so what are the things I can do at tremendous scale to help them make money? Or the last thing I would say is, an artist needs inspiration through tools, right? What palette of tools and technologies and capabilities can I help contribute to let artists express themselves in new ways? So whether it's finding an audience, making a living, or finding inspiration through new tools, that's why I'm in the music business. That's why I'm in music. Not just because I like music, but because I need to do those three things. And so that I think comes from being, intellectually honest, right? And applying a little bit of critical thought, to your passion. Being able to, I would also say other good advice would be to actually get out there and meet people. So it's, great to be online all the time, but this is a business built upon relationships. It's built upon trust. It's built upon eye contact and body language and communication and empathy. And so, getting out there, and is critical. You can't just sit there on LinkedIn or, on Facebook and, in Instagram and do it all there on YouTube. So I think, if you want to get into music and you live in, Cleveland, Ohio, or, in Mumbai, in India, you need to relocate, move to New York, move to LA, move to London, move to the nexus of where your industry is. So it's easy to sit back from afar and say, I wish I could be in music, but it's all happening somewhere else. And so if you really want to be there, you got to sacrifice, you got to make it happen. So this happens in every industry. If you want to get into automotive or get into, design or get into finance, you've got to really make sacrifices and get out there and meet people and relocate, sometimes. So be curious, be honest, try not to be superficial, get out there and meet people and figure out, what it is, what is the atomic kernel of truth in your soul, that motivates you and makes you happy. Because, you need that well of fire, it's that passion, that fire to get through the darker days and the darker moments in life. And so, having that wellspring, of passion and fire kind of, acts as a motivator to me and pushes me through when I can't see a path or when things are particularly dark.
Yeah, it's very, what you've said is very important. It's about having a direction in life and whether this is going to be your life versus a hobby. And it's a very important distinction when people talk about, the path that they want to take in life, because it's, music, as you well know, music can be a wonderful hobby, for people, but it doesn't mean it's your life. And you do have to give the kind of, thought and considerations that you just articulated if it's going to be your career. So, we want to ask you, how can people best reach Musixmatch and yourself? Is it through the website? Is it through socials?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty transparent. I'm Rio, RIO, at musixmatch.com. If anybody wants to reach me, they can email me. They can hit me up on LinkedIn. I get a lot of personal satisfaction from helping people and being a resource and being available. And so, so reach out to me in those channels, and I'm happy to direct you or help solve problems or figure out how to get your lyrics on Spotify or whatever it is you need.
Wonderful. Rio, we want to thank you so much for taking the time for doing this. This was really, really incredible and a wonderful, insightful, and very inspiring conversation. We want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. You've got...
Man, listening to this, Eric,
Yeah.
I am very, very excited.
Yeah.
There's so much possibility here, new possibilities in terms of creating value.
Indeed.
Real value for songwriters. And one of the most exciting things that Rio spoke about, which I thought was fascinating, was, filling those ecosystem gaps, especially for non-major players.
Right.
One of the points that he made, which I thought was really insightful and very true and that we don't often think of, is that, ultimately, a lot of businesses only want to buy a solution to a problem. Is I think how he put it. Access to an opportunity and everything else is secondary. But the question really becomes, how do we provide services to the rest of the industry is really what he's excited about.
Right.
That's what creates value for the new up-and-coming songwriter. That's what creates value for a new artist.
Exactly.
Not only within their own country, but around the world and with different
Right.
cultures. That's a very exciting concept that we hadn't really thought of or approached music or songs in that particular way.
And again, building another revenue stream for artists. One of the other areas that I was very interested in what he said in the conversation was about Musixmatch Pro, which is, and I quote, it was a business that they built called Musixmatch Pro, which is essentially a set of tools and services to allow songwriters and artists and labels and distributors to basically have what I would call, or what he would call, agency and influence and control over their destiny. So again, this is where you're seeing another service. You and I, Rich, have interviewed some of the top new up and coming companies that are new startups that are really turning over that agency over to the artist for them to be more in control of their career, which is very exciting.
Absolutely. And that's really what it's all about. That goes to the core philosophy of what MUBUTV is all about, which is, educating and empowering people for the next station of their career to build a very, very viable business for themselves.
Hey, Insiders, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate it. To get show notes, links, and everything that was mentioned during this interview, head on over to our official website at mubutv.com/podcast/show notes. If you're enjoying the content and what we're doing here on the show, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. And don't forget to rate and review our show at iTunes. 5-star reviews are always welcome and help to ensure that our podcast stands out on the top-rated and new and noteworthy charts on iTunes and our space. You can also find us at social media at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter X, all ending with the handle MUBUTV, which is spelled MUBUTV. Don't forget to catch our flagship show, the MUBUTV Music Business Insider video series, airing every week on YouTube at youtube.com/MUBUTV. This show was produced and created by Rich Ezra and Eric Knight. Theme music by Disciples of Babylon, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of the MUBUTV Music Business Insider Podcast.